I'm here with Jonathan Steed, a professor of chemistry, and we're going to explain chemistry for dummies today. I'm the dummy. He is the professor in the university here in Durham. So I never liked chemistry. So this is your chance to make me like it.
This is a big challenge for me. I'm not sure I'm up to it, but we'll see.
Okay, tell me, what is chemistry?
So chemistry is everything around us, really. So if you think about the molecules in your body, the things that give you energy, allow us to talk, your eyes receiving light, all of that works through changes of one molecule into another, movements of one molecule to another kind of place. So the whole area of biochemistry is just chemistry in biology. And then you've got all the area of things like materials chemistry, so all the substances around us. This wooden table that we're on right now, that's made of cellulose. That's a chemical material, and it has its properties because of the chemical bonding and structure that make it hard, because it's basically a sugar that's cross-linked really strongly to make it resisting. Yeah. So cellulose is just made out of it's basically made out of sugar types of rings. It's a carbohydrate. And so it's interesting. People often say that chemicals are bad. And there certainly are some bad chemicals, toxic chemicals, but everything in the world around us is a chemical at the end of the day. And just like people, it's not so much things are good or bad, it's how you use it, what you do with it. But I haven't really answered your question. You asked me, what is chemistry? And so really what chemistry is the way in which the arrangement of all the little atoms that are together in all the substances within your body. Chemistry involves changes of those arrangements. So you can change one little fundamental building block, we call it a molecule, into another one. So for example, if you need energy to walk and to talk, there's a little molecule in every cell in your body called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. And when your body needs energy, it takes one of those ATP molecules and it just snips off a phosphate group and it makes into adenosine diphosphate, and that gives you energy.
Oh, so everything that happens inside us is a combination of molecules doing stuff and producing different actions or reactions.
That's right, transforming one molecule into another one with different properties, releasing energy or binding to a receptor to give you a signal, like a light signal from your eyes. All of these involve changes in the bonding within molecules. And that's what chemistry is. It's the study of how one molecule changes into another. So another interesting thing we could talk about would be pharmaceuticals, for example, good medicines. So what a medicinal chemist will do will be to make hundreds, if not thousands, of different arrangements of molecules and test them to see which ones bind to a protein that causes disease. And when they find the right one, like a key to a lock, that makes a good drug that you can treat people with that disease. And they have to keep trying different molecules, different chemical arrangements, which they have to make by bubbling pots or whatever, until they find the one good molecule that will do the trick. And so again, that's an area in which they have to work out how to make the molecule, target which molecules to make, and then test them against a biological protein target.
So what do you study? What do you need to study to become a chemist, or you need to have other backgrounds in science, or you need to have different perspectives, or I guess this is kind of a stupid question. Self-awareness is a big thing, guys.
There's no such thing as stupid questions.
So tell me more about the reaction. So this is what chemistry is. You just study everything around us, but the synthetic stuff. So for example, about this can, what chemist did for us to have this can?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the can is made of aluminium, right? Aluminium is a metal, but you don't find aluminium metal naturally in the world around us. Aluminium you find in the world around us in the form of an oxide, so aluminium oxide. And it has a chemical formula. We love chemical formulae. It's Al2O3, 2 aluminiums and 3 oxygens. And aluminium atoms bind really strongly to oxygen in the world around us, and they're really hard to separate them. So a chemist has to come along and design an industrial process to take the oxygen away from the aluminium oxide to give us metallic aluminium. And that's a high energy process, and it creates waste along the process. And here we are, we're going to drink our water and then throw our can away. Perhaps we'll recycle it. And that's a waste. It's a waste of the energy. It's a waste of this valuable aluminium. Now, here's an interesting one. I told you that aluminium binds really strongly to oxygen. So why doesn't my can react with the oxygen in the air around me and spontaneously burst into flames and cause a problem? Any idea why that may be the case?
Because it's not a lot oxygen in the air, maybe.
That's a good thought, but 21% of the air is oxygen, and we're breathing it, and we're burning it in our body all the time. So there's loads of oxygen around.
You might need to force it to get closer to the molecules, or
yeah, that's right. You need to force it. That's a really good thought. You're not so stupid after all. Yeah, it's what's called. It's a very slow reaction because on the outside of the can there's a little thin layer of aluminium oxide, the natural aluminium form, and that stops the oxygen getting into it. So if you scrape the oxide away, or maybe if you just take a can, what we used to call a tin can when I was young, and you put this into a fire, then it'll burn really well once the oxide layer is gone. But it's stable because it's protected.
So so if I force oxygen into this, it will take fire?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a reaction. You'll like this. There's a reaction called the thermite reaction, and they use it for welding rails together in railways. And you take aluminium metal like the can, and you take iron oxide, which is like rust, and then you put some acid and heat on it, and the reaction of the aluminium with the oxygen is so strong that it makes metallic iron and it melts it, and you can use that to weld together railway lines.
So I didn't understand.
I'll try and put it another way. So let's say you've got two big railway lines and you want to join them together.
What railway lines are?
Yeah, like the metal rails that the train goes on.
Okay.
Which are made of iron, basically. Mm-hmm. So if you want to join them together when you're making a long railway track, then at the join place you can put iron oxide, which is like rust. So it's like
this is what they say. This is there is I'm not in Greek, but so this is how they connect things. They put oxygen.
Yeah, that's right. It's called welding.
Welding. Yeah. Welding.
So you take the iron oxide.
Wow.
You take the aluminium, and then the aluminium reacts so strongly with the oxygen that it causes so much heat that there's just smoke and flames, and the iron becomes liquid iron, and it joins the two railway lines together.
Interesting.
And the driving force for that is how strongly the aluminium reacts with the oxygen.
So the more stronger it reacts with the oxygen, the easier it will be to melt it.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. And aluminium and oxygen have a huge reaction. So every time we make a new chemical bond, we get some heat out. Any chemical bond, like I told you about ATP in your body, that gives you effectively some energy out that you can use for your metabolism. And the aluminium oxygen one is one of the strongest known, so that's why it gives so much energy.
So I heard Elon Musk saying that the Earth is made out of 30% iron.
Yeah, I don't know the numbers. I'm sure he does. But yeah, the center of the Earth is a liquid iron and nickel core, I think. So there's a lot in the middle of the Earth. And then the iron on the outside of the Earth, on the crust, is what we call oxidized iron. So like rust. It's iron that's reacted with oxygen.
So what are most of the like the Earth is made of iron, like the air, what is made of, like the space, what is made of, like tell me about like what is made of what.
Yeah, well, you get different. So the fundamental building blocks of chemistry are the chemical elements, and you've probably heard of the periodic table.
Yeah, I saw it. but I hate it.
There's one right behind you. I'm looking right at it. So I love it, of course.
We put it here.
Yes. So all the elements in the periodic table all have their different properties, and they occur in different distributions.
So all the elements in the periodic table that we see here, it's basically all the elements that we have around us.
Yes, that's right. Though some of them are not naturally occurring. So, for example, there's a metal called technetium, which doesn't occur naturally at all, and that's made in nuclear fission. So that's about 6% of the fission yield. But most other elements are natural.
What you said, fusion?
Fission.
Fusion?
Fusion is different. That's how the sun works. Fission is how a nuclear power plant works.
Okay. Oh, nuclear power plant. Can you explain me how it works?
That's more physics, but I'll give it a go.
Oh, what do you mean that's more physics? Isn't it chemistry because it's the reactions inside, and like is physics or chemistry, and where we draw the line between those two?
That's a really good question, because a lot of people doing chemistry are in physics departments, and a lot of physicists sometimes are in chemistry departments. But I think the reason I said it's physics is because in a nuclear reaction, you are changing the contents of the center of the atom. So you viewers may not know exactly how an atom is made up. So an atom has got a nucleus, a central part, and that's got protons, which define what atom it is. So hydrogen has one proton that makes it hydrogen. And it also has neutrons, and those are both in the nucleus. And on the outside are electrons. So chemistry is about the movements of electrons from one atom to another.
Whereas so physics, this is the more fundamental thing, the atom. This is this is the most smaller thing that we can break things to.
Well, you're asking some really good questions here, and particularly as somebody from Greece, of course, that originally came from the ancient Greek philosophers who talked about an atom as being indivisible. In fact, we now know you can divide atoms. So for chemists, atoms are pretty much indivisible. We don't change atoms. But physicists can, and part of the nuclear power cycle is actually taking an atom of uranium-235. It's a very special type of uranium, and breaking it up into smaller atoms, one of which is technetium that I was talking about. But that's kind of physics because it involves the nucleus. It involves protons and neutrons.
And when you are saying, but this is more physics and that's more, like, I didn't understand exactly when you draw the line between the two.
So a chemist won't ever change one type of atom into another type of atom. So if I have a hydrogen atom...
But you can mix atoms.
For sure, yeah.
And you can mix all these elements that we see, but you cannot break them.
Yeah, you can in a nuclear power plant. That does involve breaking atoms.
When you break it, you go to physics.
Yes.
So that's the line.
Yeah, that may not be the only line, but that's definitely a line for me. So chemists don't change protons and neutrons. We only worry about electrons. We change one molecule into another, but we don't change one atom into another.
So all these elements, everything, had atoms inside, or some of them doesn't have atoms and they only have electrons, or like, because, and I'm a bit confused about the what exactly are. So when we say, for example, one element of the periodic table, that's just an element, but it's probably electrons and some other things, a combination of stuff. Tell me, I don't know, I'm sharing stuff, and I started to get excited about maybe chemistry, maybe for this podcast, but in the end, we're going to see in the middle if chemistry is actually interesting. Because for me, I'm like in love with physics, in love with history, in love with everything, but like chemistry never really appealed to me as like something very useful for me to think. So let's see.
Yeah, and I seem to be doing a good job convincing you that nuclear physics is really interesting.
Well, continue what I was saying about the splitting the one element. What is made out of?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So each element of the periodic table has one kind of atom. And what
all the same atom?
Yeah, all the same atom. That's what makes it an element. So elements have only one kind of atom in them.
Only one?
Mm-hmm. That's what makes it an element.
And there is different types of atom, or there is only one atom?
In terms of what defines the type of atom in a given chemical element is the number of protons that it has. So to be hydrogen, you have to be an atom with one proton in your nucleus, and that's it. By definition, if you've got one proton, you're hydrogen. If you've got two protons, you're helium. If you've got three, you're lithium. Four, so on, you're beryllium, and it goes up. So the number of protons defines what the atom is. Now, you ask a good question, because you can get different kinds of atoms with the same numbers of protons.
Stop flirting me on the good questions.
Well, because you're stretching me. Sometimes hydrogen has one proton and it has no neutrons in the middle at all, and that's what we call normal hydrogen. But sometimes you can get heavy hydrogen, which is called deuterium, and that's got one proton again, so it's still hydrogen, but it's also got a neutron, so it weighs about twice as much. So that's a different type of hydrogen atom, but it's still hydrogen. And these are called isotopes.
And these are in the periodic table as well?
Yeah, that's right. So I think it's something like, in all hydrogen around us, something like 1 in 6,000 is a heavy hydrogen. So most of it's normal hydrogen, 1 in 6,000 is heavy hydrogen. And we use heavy hydrogen in the nuclear fuel cycle as well.
So basically, as I understood, probably in SpaceX, they use a lot of chemistry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're chemically powered rockets.
Because they need to see how the elements will react with the space, and like how the rocket will be strong enough to not burn and all this stuff. So they're probably most of their work, not most of their work, but like a big part of their work is to understand these chemist rules.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not an expert on rocket fuel, but basically it's really highly energetic chemicals that when they have a chemical reaction together, they produce lots of heat and energy. It goes back to aluminium, to ATP. All of these chemical reactions produce energy. And so to launch a rocket off, then you need to use chemical substances that undergo a chemical reaction and give off energy. Exactly what Elon Musk uses to power his rockets, he's the expert on, not me. But
so let's say I want to understand exactly, like, basically for this phone to exist, what needed to be done from a chemistry perspective, like what papers needed to be written, like how chemistry helped this phone to be alive.
Yeah, well, phones have got a lot of unusual elements in them, things like gold and things like what are called rare earth elements in them. And these are elements that are relatively in short supply. And again, they occur in rock form, normally as oxides, so normally in combination with oxygen. And to get the elements, to get the metals into the phone, we have to mine them, and then we have to process them. And often there's a very large volume
and
of
process
rock waste.
them involves, how we process them involves a lot of chemistry inside.
It does,
we clear these. So we need to find another element and do a chemical reaction with this element, so we can produce this or find this more clear thing. So
we have to separate out the valuable elements from the waste elements. And then
how do you separate?
It can be very difficult. So let me give you an example of gold mining, for example. So very small amounts of gold occur normally in quartz rock. And you have to crush that rock up with a really big rock crusher. And then typically you have to use cyanide, really toxic cyanide, to bind onto the gold. And so that you can wash it out of the rock. It's a process called leaching. And so you get gold cyanide chemical compounds out of the rock, and you get this liquid solution of cyanide and gold in water. And then you have to use something like charcoal to get rid of the cyanide from the gold and get the gold back out again.
That's why we know how, because we know all this stuff in chemistry, that's why we know how to extract gold in an easy way.
That's right. But of course, there are environmental problems with that, particularly if it's done in a poor country with people who aren't taking good environmental care. Then there can be cyanide that leaches into water streams. And it's really toxic, of course, cyanide.
So very interesting. So Elon Musk, I don't know.
Your buddy.
I'm going to, in this podcast, this is a name that we refer in every podcast. So anyway, so Elon Musk, one time he gave $100 million as a prize, and I think the goal was for a team to find a way to remove carbon dioxide, or like the CO, something that is bad in the atmosphere.
Carbon dioxide, yeah.
So and so probably chemist teams are working on this, how we can find a way to dissolve or
absorb
the CO2 on the earth.
This is a huge environmental challenge if we're to make if we're to stop global warming from going beyond the target 1.5 degrees of the Paris Climate Change Accords. So carbon dioxide is really interesting stuff, because when you take some organic matter, let's say wood, like our wooden table, and if you burn it, then you get out lots of energy, which is great. You can use it to heat your home. People have burned wood since our ancestors were coming out of caves, right? And what it produces, if there's enough oxygen, is the carbon from the wood and the dioxide from the air to make carbon dioxide. And wood is got lots of energy in it. Carbon dioxide doesn't have much energy. It's really stable. And I think what Elon Musk's challenge was to go the other way, to take the really stable carbon monoxide and find an efficient way to put it back into organic matter, wood, whatever, or just store it somewhere. And it's hard to do because carbon dioxide is not very reactive. And so it's like an energy reverse process. A lot of chemistry I've been talking about involves releasing energy and using that energy to do something. But with carbon dioxide, it's the other way around. We have to find a way to absorb this stuff that doesn't want to react with anything. And that's why it's so difficult. It's kind of a waste product.
And how do you do that? Like, you have a team in a lab and you're trying to find different reactions. Like, you have carbon dioxide and you put a lot of elements together and you try to find something that reacts to it and you absorb it. How do you do that?
Yeah, but you're not trying at random. And we know the kinds of chemistry it does. The trouble is that in order to get it to do anything, you have to give up the energy from something else. So one way...
What do you mean by that?
So let me give you an example. One way we can get carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere is just to take carbon dioxide gas and bubble it through what we call a base solution. And base is hydroxide. It's like the opposite of acid. And so carbon dioxide will react with base and it will produce carbonate, which is soluble in water. And it's the basis of rocks. So like limestone is calcium carbonate, for example. And that's good news, because if you can make carbon dioxide gas into carbonate rock, then you can store it away somewhere in a mine or whatever, and it's not in the atmosphere anymore. But the trouble is that you need vast amounts of base to do that, and you have to make the base from somewhere else, and the base itself...
So it's not worth it?
Well, it's really costly. It would work, but it depends how valuable it is to you.
We like to find a better solution that will be like, for example, okay, this is, for example, elements that we have unlimited. It's easy to whatever, throw them in the sky, and then the sky does drains or whatever, and we have the
would be great, wouldn't it? Yeah.
So, so this is an example of not a lot of energy wasted to do something, but it depends exactly what and how you produce that.
Yeah, so, at the end of the day, you get nothing for nothing.
What do you
There's
mean?
always a cost to everything. And basically, we've had a lot of benefit from burning oil and producing stable carbon dioxide. Now we have to undo that benefit. We have to give up something to get rid of the carbon dioxide.
Can you, because climate change and this carbon dioxide is a big topic, then this is one of the main problems that people are focusing now in the world. So let's dig a bit more in for me to understand what caused this. So basically these environmental issues that we have now. So it's basically making oil, the oil industry,
well, without
gas,
tarring the oil industry, but basically millions of years ago there was a lot of forests, a lot of tropical forest, and that got buried under the sea, and rock was laid down on it, and so all of all the carbon from those trees was pressurized with rock laying on it, and it became coal and oil and natural gas, basically.
So it was before it was trees.
Exactly. But the point is that then that's what trees do is they take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, and then it becomes sort of permanently locked away. Firstly as a tree, and then latterly as coal and oil and natural gas. But it's not in the atmosphere; it's fixed. And what we did,
it's somewhere hidden
under the ground, exactly.
And it's not mostly underwater. It's mostly under the ground. Where can you find
both? So you get deep sea oil deposits, you get on land oil deposits.
So when they do find in the sea oil, it's probably under the sea.
Yeah, it's under the rock.
It's not somewhere in the water, right?
That's right. Yeah, it's under rock. So it's under rock everywhere, be it sea or land. But all of that is fixed carbon. It's carbon that is sequestered away, and it's not doing any harm. It's just been sitting there for millions of years. But with the Industrial Revolution, then what we did was to dig all that up, and great, it's a source of energy. So we burned it all, and we got all that energy out, and it powered the Industrial Revolution. Steam engines, they were burning coal. Your automobile industry, burning gasoline, which is just basically derived from oil. So everything that's powered modern human society has come from this gift of fossil fuels. But the penalty was that then all that carbon that was locked away turned into carbon dioxide, and now it's in the atmosphere.
So when we needed to make coal and to get energy, that was kind of the cause.
That was the cost.
The energy that you said, you exchange energy to do something else. That was the kind of the energy they went to CO2.
That's right. That's the waste product, if you like. Even us, we breathe in oxygen, and we eat food, and we breathe out carbon dioxide. So we use that kind of. It's not exactly burning with flames, but it's just like burning. It's combining forms of carbon with oxygen to give us energy. And the waste product is carbon dioxide, but that's the cost.
Can you explain me the reaction that is happening when we breathe inside with the elements, and how do we get energy from that? Wow, now you're getting
we're wide ranging, but we seem to be talking all the way around energy. Everything involves energy.
We're going to jump and go back to a lot of the topics, but tell me about what happens when we breathe.
Yeah, it's just like a kind of burning. So we eat food, which is basically sugars, for example. It's a bit like it's the same kind of idea as burning wood. We eat carbohydrates. That's what we call a form of reduced carbon. So it's carbon that is ready to combine with oxygen, and we breathe in oxygen as well. And in our body does a chemical reaction that actually what it does is make that molecule ATP I was talking about, but effectively it releases energy. And the byproduct, the carbon turns into CO2.
So when the exact thing that happens in the body? So we eat the food, it goes to our stomach, and inside our stomach, this is inside our blood. Where this is happening exactly?
Yeah, the stomach digests it down, and it does pass into the blood. That's right.
So the stomach does the work of combining, getting the.
No. It happens inside the cell, inside every cell in your body. So the stomach just basically breaks the food down into small molecules, small fragments that can then diffuse from the stomach into the intestine and into the bloodstream.
So basically what the stomach does, it makes small things so they can do their own reaction with the other stuff.
It makes a nice little sort of liquid solution that can then go across a membrane, as it's called. It's a dividing wall between the intestines and the bloodstream. And I'm not an expert on this. This is kind of biology. But basically, the sugars that you eat, the stomach digests, and it allows them to go into your bloodstream.
Where is the line between biology and chemistry?
That's another good question. So I guess biology is about the form and function of the sort of organs in your body. And in the middle, I think we're kind of talking about biochemistry here. So it's the chemistry that goes
another whole thing by itself, biochemistry.
It's kind of the interface between what biological organisms do with the chemistry of their metabolism. So we've got sugars going into the bloodstream. The bloodstream transports the sugars to each individual cell. The sugars go into the cell, And then I think it's in the mitochondria, which is the little bits inside the cell that is combined with oxygen, which is also from the bloodstream. And effectively, it does a very small scale burning of the sugars. It oxidizes the carbon, combines it with oxygen to make carbon dioxide, and it produces energy. And the carbon dioxide then comes out of the cell into the bloodstream, and out of the bloodstream into the lungs, and we breathe it out.
Interesting. But probably it's not. So the breath that I took now, what I'm breathing out now, it will probably, it's not happening directly. It's happening probably with a lot of delay.
That's right.
Maybe now I'm converting inside my body the breath that I took like 20 minutes ago. Probably.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah. So when you take a breath, oxygen goes into your blood, and carbon dioxide from a reaction a long time ago goes out into the lungs, and you breathe it out. And they're always going backwards and forwards. And the oxygen that you breathe when you first talked about it, that's traveling around your body right now. It's going into your cells. And then, well, you're about to go on a long starvation fast, but the food that you ate before you start that will react with that oxygen, and you'll turn it into carbon dioxide. And then in a few minutes' time, you're going to breathe it out again. And, we could follow that process.
How?
So we could actually, I don't know how dangerous it would be, but we could label the oxygen that you breathe in with a different isotope. Still oxygen, but different number of neutrons. And then we could trace how that specially labeled oxygen went around your body and see how long it took to come out. I don't know how long it would be, but I think you're right, some minutes.
This is an experiment that it will happen. You are talking about experimental.
You could do an experiment like that. I think most oxygen isotopes are radioactive, so it wouldn't be a very good experiment for you.
But maybe if it's a small dose,
maybe. That's called a radio tracer kind of experiment.
So basically, chemistry is happening in the labs.
Yep. Well, it's happening everywhere. It's happening in the environment, in your body.
But the science,
research
can we say scientists or we need to call them chemists? Or
they're definitely scientists, but they're a particular flavor of scientists called chemists.
Oh, so chemistry is like a department of science.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
We are all, you are, or not we are. You are all scientists. But some of them are biological scientists, but some of them chemists, scientists.
Yeah,
so it's
exactly.
under the same umbrella of science.
Yeah, it's all science, but people have different specialisms, and they have subdisciplines even within different areas of chemistry.
So science basically is the study and the understanding of the world around us. And when you go more narrow, you say, okay, the world around us is this stuff that we see. So the chemistry is the study of the elements around us.
Yeah, how elements combine with each other to make different chemical substances, different kinds of molecules. Yeah, and you're right. Science is just a way of looking at the physical world and understanding it. And there's so much to understand that we have to understand just little bits of it. And as you can see, scientists like me and people like you, we have a little understanding of areas outside of our specialisms. We've talked a little bit about nuclear physics. We've talked a little bit about biology and biochemistry. I probably don't know what I'm talking about, but both of us are interested, and we can have that conversation about context and where the chemistry fits into the bigger science picture.
It's important for if people are going. This is what Elon Musk said, that it's very important to give people kind of their reasoning why something is important in the context of like, why for me to care about chemistry? So I need to get, what is chemistry? Okay, this is the science, and that's why it's helpful, and this is what it's making in the world. So when you talk about the motivation behind it, you are a lot more, you are going to engage a lot more in the topic because there is a reason to do. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, without chemistry, you have no medicines, for example. You really have no high technology at all. You have no agricultural industry, really, which involves the production of fertilizer, which is chemistry at the end of the day.
No vaccines.
No vaccines, absolutely. Yeah.
So it's chemistry what vaccines are, or is biochemistry?
I'd probably call it biochemistry, but it's fundamentally chemistry at the end of the day. That's right.
Because you are putting elements together to produce something that will have a different reaction.
Yeah, very sophisticated molecules that are being produced, but molecules nonetheless.
So making a vaccine is all happening in a lab.
Yep, absolutely.
Can you explain me how the vaccines are?
Yeah, and I'm not an expert on this, but I'll do my best. And so, let's take the very early vaccines.
I'm sorry, I'm asking you a lot of things that
you're keeping me on my toes. Yeah, so I think I'm not an expert on the recent mRNA vaccines that have been used to combat COVID, although they've been tremendously effective. But early vaccines. So I think, well, going back to Edward Jenner and smallpox, that was like the first vaccination. Smallpox was a really unpleasant disease, and it's been eradicated by vaccination. And I think what he did was to take dead smallpox cells and show them to the body to put them onto people's wounds. I think he used a more milder form of the disease called cowpox, if I remember rightly. But basically, it's about training the body. So if the body sees,
but you are making all this stuff in a lab, like to understand the reactions and what elements you put together.
The early ones were natural products. That they were dead forms or harmless forms of existing bacteria, and that allowed and the
how
body
you get
to train.
Where did they find all these
I think the early form was they took a mild form of the disease. They took something called cowpox, which was a mild form of smallpox. When people were infected with cowpox, then their body knew how to fight both cowpox and smallpox. I think later on, what they do now is they'll take something like the shell of a virus, but it doesn't have the virus's genetic information inside it. So the body recognizes the virus's shell as being something that's dangerous and produces antibodies to it. But what's being given is a dead virus. It can't replicate, and so it doesn't do any harm. But it's about training the body's natural immune system to react to a foreign invader without giving it a dangerous invader. That's the concept of vaccination.
So with the pills and all this stuff, the medicine industry that you're saying is basically chemistry that does it. So what? At one point in my life, I was not a believer in medicine. I was like, oh, maybe you can't treat everything by yourself. Like it's better to not take any pills or all this stuff. So, but after I understood that any like a small thing, if I, for example, take a lot of sugar now, I will have so many reactions in my body, and I would feel the emotions. I would feel differently if I didn't. So I was like, oh my god, yeah. If they do the pill the right way, probably to have a lot of chemical reactions inside me, so they're probably effective. But can you tell me generally of like so what and where medicines are going, are the dark side also on medicine, because we are using people are getting like 10 pills a day for all the small things. Like there is overconsumption that you can do with pills, or maybe this is not your area as well. So I don't know.
It is to some extent.
And I don't know exactly what are your areas. So that's it.
I think I'm finding out. No, this is a really good question, and I think I can give you a kind of big picture answer to that. So your body is a chemical system, right? And so there are thousands of chemical reactions all going on, and there's all a balance, right? So you need enough food coming in to make enough energy to function. If you don't need enough food, then you're out of balance. So some diseases involve a misbalance, and you can, for example, so my wife had hypothyroidism, so she wasn't producing enough thyroxine in her thyroid, and it made her very tired, and that was because her hormone balance was out because of Graves' disease, as it's called. And the way that can be treated is to take as a pill some thyroxine, which is a hormone that normally the body naturally produces. She wasn't making enough of it, so taking the pill with extra was a way to make her feel better. But of course, if you take too much, if your thyroxine levels go up too high, then you get what's called hyperthyroidism, and then you feel juddery and crazy. So it's about keeping your body in the right range. And so, like you said, if you eat too much sugar, you might get a bit hyper because you've got too much energy available. And it's the same with many medicines. That scientists have done a very detailed study of many, many different kinds of disease, and they've worked out why the disease is what it is. And they've, in very many cases, invented a way to treat that disease. And if you use that medicine in the right way, if you take the right amount, you can restore your body to the right kind of balance. Let's say something really severe like a cancer. What the medicine does is to kill the cancer cells and try and reduce the balance.
Find the solution for cancer is also going to become done by chemistry as well.
Exactly, yeah. Biological chemists, medicinal chemists, and formulation scientists. So, but every medicine has what's called a therapeutic range. And what that means is you take too little of it, it doesn't really do anything. But you take too much of it and you might start to get harmful effects. And in the middle, in the therapeutic range, is where it has a benefit.
But isn't it different on each person?
Yes, it's different for each person.
But how do we have medicines for everyone, kind of? And because everyone has a different body.
Yeah, but there are many things in common. But if you're a big person, you might need more of a medicine than a small person does. So, and there's a whole area called personalized medicine where people are trying to look at exactly what your personal individual body needs and give you exactly what you want. Because at the moment, what way we do it is we do it on averages. Higher dose for big people.
That's where there is errors also.
There can be errors,
because me, for example, I might have a lot of something and I'm not the average, I'm an outlier. So something a medicine that you give me can have a different reaction that we don't want actually to have. That's very interesting. That's kind of
you may have an allergic reaction. Some people are allergic to penicillin. They need a different antibiotic, for example.
So that's kind of an error with the medicine industry, right? That if it's not personalized medicines.
I'm not going to call it an error. The medicines industry does an awful lot of good for an awful lot of people. But because we're all different, it's very difficult. It requires more resources, more funding, more doctors' time to look at everybody completely individually. And so we do the best we can. And obviously things are improving all the time. But you're right that there can be different effects with different people.
But if you know exactly what's the reactions and what's the chemicals inside each one's body, you can actually do miracles with the medicine. So,
well, I'm not going to call it a miracle because it's science, but you can have very, very good effects. Absolutely.
That's fine. So I am very, very interested. In every podcast we mention AI here and the future. How do you see the future of chemistry involved in AI, and how does AI will affect this industry?
That's really interesting. You should say that because I was just playing with ChatGPT maybe 2 weeks ago because in my area of chemistry, and obviously I'm not an AI specialist, but we've started to think about the effects this may have. And so for me, for example, as an educator, as somebody who grades student papers, I'm now beginning to be worried that maybe I'm going to get handed something which has been written by ChatGPT and not by the student. So when I've heard about people beginning to develop software that maybe can detect AI. So I hear, and I'm just going by what I hear in the popular media, right? So I hear that chatbots tend to have fairly regular sentence lengths, whereas humans vary it quite a lot. We have short and long sentences. And that's just a high-level idea as to how you might differentiate.
But when you say to ChatGPT or whatever, but put this higher as low, then you
sound more like a human, right? Yeah, I bet you're right. It can do that. Yeah. So yeah, I had to play with it, and I was very impressed. I asked it. You love history, and I do too. So I asked it to tell me about the history of the Tudors. And
of what?
The Tudors, so like Henry VIII and his 6 wives.
Okay.
And it did a pretty good job. It was an interesting little essay that it produced on that, and I didn't see anything wrong with that. But then I tried it on my specialist area. I asked it about supramolecular chemistry, and it was pretty bad.
Okay.
Because I'm an expert in that, I could spot the errors that it had made. But it wasn't awful. And of course, as you rightly say, AI is going to increase exponentially over the next 10 years, so I hear.
So exactly in what, like, let's, so if, what is the stuff that AI will do in the chemist? It will probably tell you, like, put this element and this element together because it will have unlimited information and will know all the stuff we're talking about in the future. So and it will give you the answer how to get the carbon dioxide out of the air. Like, do you think
I don't know how much new knowledge it can invent from scratch. Okay, but I'll tell you one thing that it would be able to do.
What do you mean new knowledge? From scratch.
So a way that really worked to cure global warming by sequestering
but it's not
carbon
new. It will not invent it from scratch. It will invent it from all the data that we have and all the stuff that happened in history and all the stuff that we will feed him. So it's not kind of from scratch.
Yeah,
so it might be able to find patterns that us humans were not clever to see.
Yeah, that's what it's good at, isn't it? And I'll tell you an example where I think it would be really good in chemistry. So in the area of organic chemistry, which is the chemistry of making molecules like drugs, there's lots and lots of different known kinds of chemical reaction. So if I want to make like a big molecule that's going to be a really good medicine, I bet you that you'll be able to ask artificial intelligence, how will I make this molecule? And it will look at the different parts of the structure, and it will say, okay, you've got a benzene ring there. I know how to make benzene rings. And then you've got a carboxylic acid group. I know how to make carboxylic acids. And it will say, okay, based upon all this big area of information, which I can't remember, this is a route that you may be able to get to it. That kind of thing would be incredibly useful.
And we might be able to make food in a different way with this stuff. Make like tables in a different reaction.
Yeah, possibly.
Might find us more efficient ways to do stuff and become cheaper. And I don't know.
Yeah, and the way you summed it up, which is it's able to have an overview of far more data and knowledge than a human can. And if you can synthesize something useful from combining all that information in a way a human might miss, that's where the strengths are going to be. But I'm not an AI scientist by any means. I'm just a popular guy on the street.
It's good to like put the thoughts together because I can see a bit of a big future of AI, but it's good for us to kind of narrow it down to chemistry, and maybe that's kind of the most fundamental contribution that AI can do in chemistry because that's kind of the fundamental of the stuff that were around us. So I don't know. It seems it can do.
Yeah, I've also heard of. So one of my other jobs is to edit a scientific journal, and I've heard of people wanting to add ChatGPT as an author of their scientific paper because it's written some of the introductory material for them. And I work with the American Chemical Society. We have a policy that no AI bots can be an author because the author has to take responsibility for its work, and the AI bot can't do that. So at the moment, it counts as being a methods section. You put in your methods section, we use ChatGPT. But of course, if people aren't honest and they just use it without actually accrediting it, then it may be difficult to know who's created the content and whether it's right or not, because sometimes it makes mistakes.
Yeah, and not having accountability for what you write as well.
Right.
That's interesting thought to kind of follow that route as well. But let's talk about like you told me that you are teaching like hundreds of students. Like what a typical lecture that you do? How many people are coming to see your lectures?
Yeah, I mean, Durham University is a relatively small university. We're small and beautifully formed. But so my second year class of inorganic chemists that I'm lecturing to tomorrow is maybe around 150 students or so.
Oh, wow.
All of them very interested in inorganic chemistry now.
Are they?
Well, do you know, I think they are. I often get questions after class. And
what is can you tell me a bit about your field? What is exactly what you are, inorganic, what you said?
Yeah, so very often university academics, our research is different to what we teach. So I teach some things that I don't necessarily research, but let me tell you about inorganic chemistry.
So this is not your research?
Somewhat, but not entirely. So inorganic chemistry is the chemistry of most of the periodic table, apart from transformations of carbon, basically. So it's chemistry involving metals. So our aluminium oxide conversation, that's inorganic chemistry. So not organic chemistry. So nothing to do with carbon-hydrogen bonds, basically. And so the sorts of things I teach to the second year of my university degree are things like why things are colored, why you get beautiful colors in pigments in art, for example, why things are magnetic.
Why you get color? Is it chemistry?
Yeah, basically, you think about if you're an artist, then you will have a bunch of paints, and those paints are all different chemical substances, and their color arises from the chemical structure of each of the pigments. Some of them are organic, some of them are inorganic, but very often they're inorganic substances.
Color is not something that it's kind of our perception is okay, interesting. So you can. So the color that I see here in my phone, it's basically chemistry that. So you can make different chemical reactions and have different colors.
You absolutely can. The phone's a bit different because you're using electronics to produce light of different wavelengths that your eyes can see. And so you're not seeing the colors on your screen don't arise from pigments. They don't arise from chemical substances. They come from different kind of light going through a filter.
Isn't it still chemical substances? The screen that we see
underlying it. That's right. It's all made out of chemical materials that have had to be made by a materials chemist.
And it still happens a reaction.
But there's not a chemical reaction going on in the phone except to produce the energy in the battery. So your battery will be a lithium-ion battery, which won the Nobel Prize for chemistry. Actually, what was it? I think 2 years ago. So M. Stanley Whittingham and John Goodenough in his 90s just was able to. Luckily, was still alive and able to receive the Nobel Prize for these lithium-ion batteries.
What was that about? Because again. Elon Musk is saying so many good stuff about lithium batteries. He's saying that we have unlimited lithium in the world, and it's like the only way to make batteries, and it's very helpful to make Tesla batteries. So tell me a bit about, is it the same thing that they discovered, that they got the Nobel Prize
yeah,
for?
That's right. So you'll have probably seen there's been a revolution in small electronics because we now have lithium-ion batteries that can power them. I have a robot vacuum cleaner at home that can go around my whole house on the power of one charge of its battery, and that would be unthinkable when I was a kid. And it's because we can store a lot of energy in a lithium-ion battery, and it comes back to energy again.
Interesting. Oh, wow.
So we can.
Wow.
We can put enough energetic chemicals in a lithium-ion battery that we can store energy and then use it to clean my house or whatever. But then we can put that energy back in again and reverse the chemical reaction that produced it and have it ready to use again. So that ability to put energy in and out.
You mean to charge it?
To charge it, exactly.
This is what the process.
That's a reversal of a chemical reaction. We're putting it back to a high-energy chemical state so that we can use it again. And that's exactly what doesn't happen when you burn wood. We can't go the other way and get carbon dioxide back into wood.
So it's a very special thing. So basically what is good about the lithium batteries is like, basically, can you tell me what the battery is actually?
Battery is an energy storage device. But the old-fashioned, what are called primary batteries, you use them once and then you have to throw them away. And that's a huge waste. But the beauty of rechargeable batteries is that, of course, you don't throw them away. You use them many, many times, and you can generate that energy through something more clean. So
isn't it very stupid that we still buy not rechargeable batteries?
I'm not going to say stupid, no, because it depends what you want to use it for. So let's say, for example, you have a security camera in your house that needs a battery, and you want that camera to be on all the time, basically. But it only needs to come on when emotion is detected. So it may be that most of the time that camera is not using anything. Then over time, the lithium-ion battery may discharge, whereas what's called a primary battery will it's normally keeps its charge better.
Okay, so there is some disadvantages as well in the lithium batteries when it goes to the long run.
There can be, that's right. So if you want something that's going to last a really long time and you're not going to use it very often, then a primary battery is still a good idea.
So maybe it's a good idea for a clock to use
maybe
battery, not the lithium, or not the rechargeable battery.
Yeah, so there's still uses, things like a watch battery. That's right. It tends not to be rechargeable because it lasts for years anyway.
So basically what a battery is a store of energy, but the lithium battery, what it has amazing is that it can store a lot of energy in a small space.
Yes, and it can do it reversibly. So
that's the key, that it can do it reversibly.
Right.
But a battery can store, a lithium battery and a normal battery can store the same thing to the same space. But the cool thing about lithium battery, you can actually recharge the whole thing. It will be the same. This is the...
Yeah, exactly. It's the recharging, and the beauty of the lithium battery is that when the chemical reaction has occurred that gives out the energy, then you can reverse that chemical reaction by putting the energy back in again. And so really, it's doing something that's not very different to burning wood to produce heat and carbon dioxide, but it's reversible.
How are batteries made?
Wow, good question. I don't know the engineering of a battery. I think that there's basically...
I'm asking a bit more about the molecules. What do you need to extract from the earth, to make a battery?
So it's not something I'm an expert in, but you basically need a variety of electrode materials, including some relatively rare earth elements.
I love that, when a person understands, this is not something that because so many people are talking about, this, and they think their opinion is something, it's very valuable. But when you say that you are not an expert in things, it's amazing to have this self-awareness too.
Well, that's what you find in a scientist, that scientists will try and tell you what they know. Good ones. But they will tell you the limit of their knowledge, and I know enough to be dangerous about batteries, but I don't really know the chemistry that goes on inside them. In fact, my colleague just down the corridor is a real expert in these sorts of things. So if I try and explain it, I'm going to get caught out. but yeah, it's a case of having chemical reactions that can produce a flow of electrons and release energy that you can reverse. And obviously lithium salts are involved. I think there's some more difficult to get hold of minerals that are involved as well. So it may be that vast numbers of batteries will be difficult to scale. And your buddy Elon Musk will know more about that than I do in terms of producing vast numbers of electric cars.
So let's come back to the topic that we said about teaching. You said you are teaching tomorrow 150 students on this topic. How do you find this teaching chemistry experience? Does it help you stay sharp? The questions of the students on your topic, how do you find this whole experience?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I started teaching in 1995, would you believe?
Now I've started believing that you are saying this. This is a good question to everyone.
I enjoy questions. But I tell you, the thing I was most nervous about was not doing science, not even trying to get science funding, but the fact that a student might ask me a question that I wouldn't know the answer to. And here we are, we're nearly 28 years on. I've been teaching for, and students have asked me a lot of questions over the years, and I don't always know the answer, but I'll always say, well, I don't know the answer to that, but I'll find out. That's a good question. Most of the time these days, I do know the answer.
to your topic.
To my topic, absolutely.
So you go and you do enjoy teaching?
Very much.
Are you stressed before one lecture that you're going to have?
Not at all anymore. The really fun thing is that as a scientist, some things about the world around you, and teaching is getting to share that joy with the people who want to learn. So I can come along and I can say to students, why do you think red paint is colored? And we can talk about that. So we were talking about color in a lecture a couple of weeks ago. And we were talking about how the visible region of light has a particular energy range. It's around between 400 and 700 nanometers wavelength. And and a student came along afterwards and said, really good question, why do you think our eyes only see that particular wavelength and not any? Why don't we see in the infrared or the ultraviolet? And I don't know the answer offhand, but my guess probably would be that that's the most intense form of sunlight that falls on the Earth. So when we were evolving, that was a good wavelength for our eyes to evolve to see, because ultraviolet tends to get shielded out by the ozone layer. Infrared is low energy; it's not very penetrating. So the most useful thing to see is that 400 to 700 nanometers. Evolutionary biologists are probably shouting at the screen now and saying, no, that's wrong. But that was my guess in response to my student's question.
This is kind of interesting because I was talking on this podcast with Donald Hoffman, another scientist, and he was describing that it's basically impossible to see reality as it is. Our vision, our senses is definitely give reality distorted. Because we are evolved just to do the minimum to survive.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. Yeah, I was reading a book about that, just a popular science book, and again, it's not my area, but I heard something very similar to that our brain is creating a model of what's going on based on the inputs that it gets, and sometimes I think that was. The book that I was reading said that may be something to do with the origin of dreams, that when there are not many inputs coming in, the brain is trying to find a model to explain the world around it. And in fact, the information coming in is often quite simple, and we learn to interpret it in complex ways. But again, we're almost straying into kind of philosophy and psychology there, aren't we?
So when you teach, this what type of students is it? As a particular person, a bit more analytical, that they are drawn into chemistry? Do you see a certain maybe more students from China or whatever? Do you see kind of patterns between the people that they are attracted to this topic?
No, I don't really. I think what unites people is an interest in the world around them, like you, basically. So we're a university that's in the north of England, so we could do better in terms of attracting international students. But we have all races, all genders, all ethnicities here, and all of them are just interested in how the world works, the fundamentals of how we can explain the world around us in terms that are physically meaningful. And as long as people are interested, then I think that they make good scientists, because they're curious and want to know why.
And what are the routes that people can take after they finish chemistry in the university? What is some options that you can go and work at?
Yeah, well, one thing is you can become a chemist.
Yes.
So you could work for a pharmaceutical industry. You could be making, you could be in drug discovery. You could be making new medicines. You could be a formulator where you take the drugs and you put them into pills. You could, but equally, people do things that are outside of chemistry. So my students have gone on to be accountants, lawyers, these kinds of jobs that need the ability to think rationally. But they don't necessarily use their subject-specific knowledge. They use their transferable skills. And I think a university degree is about far more than just the facts that you learn. It's about learning how to learn, learning that self-discipline.
My God, now we're going to get to a debate. Because I'm 22, I didn't study in a university. So kind of the thing that we can do, I think that will be interesting, is I think a person can become a chemist without going to university.
Sure.
And he can study online, find everything online, and not spend so much money to come in the university. But what do you think are because you are a university professor, so
so I'm going to be biased.
So yeah, and I am biased to my experience that maybe it's better to go online and or actually go and find the professor of chemistry and talk to them in person, or there is so much benefits that I see, but I don't see the other benefits of the education. I've never been, so maybe you can share your perspective on this topic?
I think it depends on the kind of person that you are. You're somebody who's just launched themselves out into the world, and you're not afraid to try all kinds of new things, and you're able to learn because you have a great deal of drive. And I think each individual has their own learning style, and I think the university system is quite a traditional system, of course, but it suits people who want some structure, but it also allows people to be challenged, perhaps over and above they might challenge themselves, because we can ask them questions perhaps they haven't thought of before. We can show them things they may not think to look for. If you think about all the resources that are out there online now, Wikipedia or whatever, it's wonderful, but you need to know what questions to ask. You're very good at thinking up questions yourself that you want to know the answers to, but I think you need some kind of starting point, some basis in education or in curiosity or in your worldview to start to ask those questions and seek out the answers. So I can go read Wikipedia and find out stuff because I know what I want to know, and I have enough experience to know what is correct and what isn't. And Wikipedia is normally very good, but if you didn't know anything to start with, then you need some mechanism to begin to learn so that you know what else to learn and how to differentiate what is right and what isn't right. So I think that kind of structure is something that for some people, a higher education degree is good. And certainly you can meet people like me who will bore you rigid about what we think about various kinds of subjects.
What type of relationships you have with your students? Like, do you go there? You're the teacher that goes to the coffee shop with them later? Do you email? What type of distance do you have with your?
Yeah, it changes over time. I mean, in my younger days, I wasn't much older than students, and so we used to go to the pub and have a beer together. Obviously, now I've got grown-up children of my own, and I don't have quite that same kind of relationship. But I think the relationship I have is one of just always being open to answer their questions and help them. As I said to you before, there's no such thing as a stupid question. And so
you are very passionate about their questions, as I understood.
Yeah, and to make certain that they're getting the resources that they need, and to make it a pleasant experience for them. I think if somebody has a question that they want the answer to, it's not a stupid question, and they deserve the answer, whether it's a high-level question, a low-level question, whatever it is. And so, my job's here to help people to learn and to show them the wonderful things in the world.
So I find one of the most interesting questions that I can ask to people cleverer than me is, how do you learn? How did you learn, and how I can learn faster? Yeah,
and I think being interested is really the key thing, because it doesn't feel like work if you're interested, does it? When I wrote a book on my area of chemistry, and there was a lot of reading and looking up and learning to go into that book, but it was all fascinating, and so it was a little bit like creating a living museum of all the fun things I was finding, and so because I was interested, it didn't feel like work; it felt like an enjoyable task. I remember being a student and having to read lecture notes, and some of it wasn't so interesting, and then it took a long time to learn. So being interested and making it feel like almost a game is really the fastest way I've found to learn, but everybody's different.
Interesting. So follow kind of where it's your curiosity and kind of follow the fun paths. So, the learning will come naturally there. And that it will not feel like work, the learning. And so interesting.
For me, at least. I mean, everybody's different. That was certainly what I found was a good way. I remember when I was revising for exams, I would have a little quiz, short question and answer, because I seemed to like answering quiz questions, whereas for other people, they can read and remember straight away. But it's not easy if you have to learn. It's much more fun if you want to learn.
And how can we make that to students as well of university? Because as you said, that's the university kind of make it a must for them to learn, and it maybe sometimes remove the fun out of it. So how we can make the students in the university or people more interested to that type of learning? and how a professor like you, what you can do differently to encourage that learning type?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think if I had all the answers, then I'd make a fortune. I think enthusiasm. I think showing people that you find it really interesting and trying to convince them why that is the case. So around this table, I normally have 6 or so students each week, and we do a tutorial, and we talk about whatever area of chemistry we're doing, structure, bonding in molecules. And sometimes they have to learn the rules and the language to be able to talk about the chemistry, and that can be pretty boring. And so we're talking about particular molecules. The students haven't heard of them before. They're having to learn rules to determine their structure. And I can see that might be an area that's challenging for students to keep their interest. And so one thing that I do is I then try and tell them a bit about that molecule. So let me give you an example. One molecule you won't have heard of is chlorine trifluoride.
Of course I heard that.
You're the exception.
I'm joking.
And as teachers, we love this molecule because it's got a really funny shape, and it's a really good illustration of the rules about shape as to why it's got that shape. But it's a really obscure molecule. But it has a really interesting history to it, that it's one of the strongest agents for adding fluorine to things. So in the war, people used to drop it on other people, and it would just cause really, really bad fires because it's a tremendous incendiary, really high energy chemical.
What do you mean fires?
It would set light to tarmac or buildings or people because it burns so strongly. Because it's a high energy molecule. Again.
And what items, where do we use it exactly in a daily life?
So in chemistry, it's used for adding fluorine atoms to things. And where that's important is again, making drug molecules. So if there's a particular route that your body has to attack a drug molecule at a particular place on its structure, you can block that sometimes by adding a fluorine atom. Because fluorine atoms aren't really part of your natural biochemistry. Your body doesn't know what to do with them, so it just kind of ignores them. So if your drug is not quite getting to its target because it's being metabolized, put a fluorine atom there, and that will block off that site and allow your drug to work better. So making fluorine-containing drugs is a good use for chlorine trifluoride, but a bad use is dropping it on people and burning them. So it's a question of, it's not the chemical that's good or bad, it's the use.
Okay, so have enthusiasm for the topic, and that will be the one thing that will make people actually excited kind of to learn that thing.
I hope so. And I guess the other side of the coin is listen. You have to listen to what people are asking, because I've got enthusiasm, and if I talk about what I want to talk about, that may not be what they want to hear, and I turn them off.
Interesting.
So maybe enthusiasm and listening.
Oh, that's interesting.
You have the good listening skills.
Because you need to kind of reverse engineer what the other person is kind of passionate about, and what.
Yeah, maybe.
And if you want, that's interesting, because you can mention some stuff that the other person knows. For example, when you talk with me and you're trying to teach me, you can use, think about a YouTube channel and give examples, and that makes it kind of more, brings it kind of in my words. So if you are reversing engineering, so you said before you're passionate about Elon Musk company, so let me teach you how he makes the rocket, and you can make me excited.
Yeah, that would be an interest of yours that would relate to chemistry.
And I would be, yes, please teach me chemistry if it's about. So I think that's interesting. So we have here the most heavy book I ever saw in my life. Wow, how many pounds is this?
In weight? I don't know. It must be a kilo or something.
A lot of pounds. So this is the book that you wrote, right?
Yeah, this was my lockdown project. So when we all went into lockdown because of COVID.
And the third edition.
Yeah, I've been writing this off and on since about 2000. So this is the third edition. As I keep finding out more interesting things to tell people about, then I keep adding into this book. So anything you want to know about supramolecular chemistry will be in there. It's like my museum where I keep all the fun stuff I've found, and I put in there. Let me give you an example of some of the really fun things that I found in chemistry that I put in the book. So there's a kind of molecule called a molecular Iron Maiden. Have you ever come across an Iron Maiden? Do you know what that is?
Mm-mm.
So this is a horrible thing. It's like a medieval torture device.
Medieval torture device.
Yeah. So if you really hated somebody in medieval times and you wanted to torture them to get information out of them, you take this cage and you put the person inside and there's spikes in the cage, and then you close the cage on them slowly and the spikes kind of go backwards and forwards. So it's a horrible thing. But there are kinds of molecules called molecular Iron Maidens, and they force bonds to become really, really close upon each other, and we can learn interesting things about the way bonds behave under tension. And so in the book, I have a picture of an old-fashioned torture device, an Iron Maiden, and the molecule equivalent. And it really makes you realize that something is being really crushed in a way it doesn't want to. And that's really what's going on with the chemistry as well. And I just thought that's a really nice analogy, kind of a gruesome analogy, but
so this inside, like if I read this, okay, which I'm not sure I'm going to do, but
might take you a while.
But if I read everything inside, what I will live and know?
So this book is about the way in which one molecule interacts with another. So most of the chemistry we've talked about is how we transform one molecule into another one. We make and break chemical bonds and release energy, typically. But there's another area of chemistry which is not about how one molecule changes into another molecule, but the way in which molecules link together to make bigger structures. So I'll give you an example. The way in which a virus is structured is that it has a coat around it, a sheath made up of individual protein molecules, and that coating protects that virus's genetic information. So a virus will have RNA, ribonucleic acid, in the middle of a protein sheath, and the protein protects it. And one of the things you will learn from chapter 2 is the way in which these protein sheaths assemble to protect the virus's information, because that's about the assembly of molecules, not just making one molecule, but adding many molecules together to make a big structure.
So basically, I will learn how two molecules interact.
Together. 2 or 5 or 100, so that we can make a bigger structure by adding many molecules together. And that's really what comes down to materials chemistry. It's a wooden table, for example, is not one molecule of cellulose. It's many molecules linked together, and the properties that give the table its hardness is not so much the property of one molecule, it's the property of all the molecules acting together.
Okay, so the difference between the other one that you said is that in where you don't try to create new molecules and you're trying to just put them all together.
So let me give you another example. Let's say you want to do some sensing. So let's say you want to sense whether or not there's a particular pollutant in a river.
What pollutant mean?
Pollutant mean like a toxic chemical. So let's say it's like mercury or something like that you don't want in a river. So a sensor would be something which would maybe light up if it detected the toxic chemical, but otherwise would be dark if it didn't. So in that, we don't want to do any chemistry because, we may not want to do chemistry because what we want to do is to have something recognize and bind onto the toxic chemical and cause a response. So if we have a sensor with a particular structure that recognizes the toxic chemical, binds to it, and shines a light, then that would be the interaction between the two molecules, not their individual structure. So that kind of area of sensing would be one example. And that's the way in which, for example, nerve cells, nerve signals are transmitted in your body. That's a recognition process.
Also, our body, it's a master of doing the light thing with the river.
Yeah, it's sensing and recognizing. So neurotransmitters are chemical molecules that travel from one cell to another to pass on a nerve signal. And they activate various neurons and give you rise to your nerve signal. So your body's very good at recognizing. Drug into a protein is another act of recognition. The protein and the drug are two different molecules, but when the drug binds into the protein's active site, it either stops it from having its effect or changes its effect in a beneficial way. So there's a whole area of chemistry about interactions between molecules as well as making the molecules in the first place.
Wow. So what type of thinking, if let's say I become an expert, let's say on physics, on chemistry, I will give you an example with me. I'm a YouTuber. So when you are a YouTuber, what you learn and you know very well is how to tell a good story, to retain people to watch and influence their emotions in the video. So I'm learning how to tell good stories. And I have a perspective of good storytelling, and like I can understand conversations and all this. But for example, what type of stuff when you are a physicist, when you are a chemist, what type of perspective you gain and what type of really good learning you have in comparison to the example that I gave you as a YouTuber?
Yeah, well, one thing you learn is also how to tell stories, I think. A good scientific paper tells a good story of the science, but that wasn't quite your question. I think it's an appreciation of the fact that the world around you runs upon well-defined chemical principles, and there's usually an answer to why something is happening if you just go and look for it. So if you like it in a good way, it takes the magic away in the sense that you don't have to believe things occur for no reason at all, or that you can't control them. In fact, a sound knowledge of physical sciences, so chemistry, physics, biochemistry, biology, allows you to think mechanistically. It allows you to think that's happening for a reason that I can understand and potentially control, and I don't have to be scared of.
Wow. So it takes the magic away.
In a good way.
And you can learn how to influence and make the magic.
Exactly. You don't have to just guess why something is happening. You don't have to be afraid of it. You understand why it's happening, and you understand how to make it do it more, make it do it less. It's like, thunder, for example. That's physics rather than chemistry, but it's about, the displacement of air. And so even though it's a loud noise, it's not something that we have to be scared of because we understand why it's happening. Whereas ancient people were probably very afraid of that.
Interesting. Yeah, very interesting. If I give you $1 trillion now.
Thanks.
Which I don't have.
Yet.
Nobody has.
We can ask Elon Musk.
Not even him yet. So how you are going to spend it for research, to help this chemistry world?
Wow, that's a really good question. I haven't ever thought in terms of those huge kinds of numbers. I think probably widening access to fundamental needs, access to energy, access to healthcare, access to clean drinking water, and technologies that can enable that is probably the biggest societal problem. So many people don't even have access to clean drinking water, and we can help that as chemists. So there's, for example, there's a class of materials called metal organic frameworks, right, which can act as water harvesters. So they will take desert air, which is dry air, and basically by solar power, they will absorb that air and create liquid water, clean liquid water out of it. And that kind of technology has emerged over the last 2 or 3 years, maybe. And if you can make a big one of these, and they're already kind of coming into existence, that can supply a whole village in an arid area that otherwise has contaminated drinking water. Things like arsenic in wells in places like Bangladesh is a big problem. If you can give people clean, pure water without them being close to a clean, pure water supply, there's a huge societal benefit. So funding that kind of research at scale would be really good. Not just working out how to do it. We sort of know how to do it, but buying by these absorbing materials, these metal organic frameworks, again based on aluminium, actually.
So I'm very interesting what you're saying, but I didn't quite understand the product. How to make the water in the?
So we know the fundamental chemistry of how we can make a material that will absorb water from air. at scale.
Okay.
But then making enough of them that you can take them to all the places in the world that need it, that requires a huge investment in terms of upscaling
Because
that technology.
the air has a lot of water inside.
Yeah, that's right. Even desert air, maybe a humidity of 20-30% or so, that's enough to harvest water from.
And that is clean water that you can drink?
Yeah, because it's just condensed from the atmosphere, so it's got no impurities in it. So very clean drinking water. And that would make a huge difference to people's lives. And I think that's a World Health
I don't think
Organization
people
goal.
can understand exactly how many people. I went to the worst, poorest country, Burundi, and they don't have clean water.
Right.
It's
You can't
like
do anything
very
with it.
rare, especially in a village. They die from a lot of diseases because they don't have clean water. So,
Right.
and it sounds like we're two people in their cell, but they don't. They die because they don't have clean water. This is crazy.
Yeah, something we take for granted in Western Europe and the US.
Yeah. So you are going to, with all this $1 trillion, you're going to fund projects like this to understand the science a lot better.
Yeah, refine the science, make it work really efficiently,
and make
it
a
work in green
product
way.
that actually can.
Yeah, I think that would make a big difference. That would probably take a decent chunk of the $1 trillion, maybe not all of it, but I think that would be a good start, maybe. And I think we already talked about the other one. I mean, global warming and carbon capture and storage, and that would be another huge one.
To put money for research on that. I want a bit more detailed answer. Like, okay, make a lab as well. Like, make a university or like put people together. Like,
a lot of these often are actually economic challenges rather than scientific challenges. There are ways, as we've just said, to create clean drinking water. There are ways to capture and store carbon dioxide. It's a question of doing it on a scale that it's cheap enough that people are willing to do it, and obviously getting everybody to work together. And now we're straying into politics, but I think these kinds of grand challenges are the sorts of things your $1 trillion should go towards. And I guess if the economics is taken out of the equation, if it doesn't cost somebody to help somebody else because there's $1 trillion available, then maybe it can be made to work at scale, and we can apply solutions we kind of already have, but just lack the cohesiveness to be able to apply.
What cohesiveness?
I was trying not to say politics.
What?
I was trying not to say politics, but yeah, these things require everybody to work together. That's what I meant by cohesiveness. In a kind of selfless way. We seem to be moving the wrong direction on that, but again, I'm straying into politics. But I think these huge. We already know what these huge societal challenges are. Clean energy, clean drinking water, atmospheric changing. Applying this kind of money to take existing chemical solutions, refine them to the point where they're usable.
Refine them, and by that meaning finding exactly how it will be cheap and convertible.
And efficient, exactly. Okay. Yeah. Like, for example, solar cells. I've got solar panels on my roof at home.
Good.
And the conversion efficiency is, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12% for every photon that hits, you get an electron out of energy. Don't quote me on that because that's physics again. But, if we can even make them 5% more efficient by intensive research into materials chemistry, that's going to be a huge benefit because it's such a big scale. So these kinds of things, just making things more scalable, more applicable, applying them on a larger scale in a slightly more efficient way. That's probably where that very large sum of money would be best spent.
So $1 trillion. It will be spent on the biggest problems of humanity to solve the problems. This is where you're going to spend.
I think that would be my answer, but I'm going to caveat that with just one other point, that I would take maybe 5% of it, that's about $5 billion, quite a bit, and put that into pure research, fundamental research that I can't tell you what it's for. So just curiosity-driven research so that people can discover the next technology just by virtue of going, that's funny. Wonder why it does that. And we've discovered a lot of things about the world by going, that's funny. In fact, there's one of my favorite quotes is that most science doesn't start with eureka. It starts with, That's funny.
I heard about that. I heard about a lot of scientists saying this, and I think this is actually a very, very cool idea, because like you don't know what that 5% of the money will produce, but it might produce something that the 95% of the money, because it's based what you don't know that you don't know.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, probably 90% of those projects may be kind of cool, but not ultimately useful.
Or
to
maybe
society.
99.
Yeah, maybe 99.
Or maybe 99.9, but the one.
You just need one. Exactly.
Project that the one finding that.
Yeah, well, and you also need to spread bet. You can't put all of your eggs into one basket. So you just need people with expertise in
So you are not going to
areas.
only invest in chemistry.
You're right. I probably wouldn't. I would invest in all kinds of fundamental curiosity-driven research, and I wouldn't care whether it was called chemistry or not. Because, of course, if it's new and curiosity-driven, it may not fit into the discipline of chemistry or physics or anything.
So
it may be something
putting a
different.
barrier and a label, you limit yourself to.
Yeah. And there is now interest in what's called interdisciplinary research, where people are working together. I was involved in a project funded by the Leverhulme Trust on complex knots. So just looking at the fundamental properties of knotted systems, like literally tying a knot in string. But it involved collaboration with physicists, chemists, and anthropologists who were looking at people's attitudes towards tying knots. And it was a really interesting project. And we ended up tying knots in chemical reaction fields. I barely understood it myself. It was kind of crazy, but it was about a chemical reaction wave, like a wave in the ocean, tying that up into a knot, or what we call complex topology. And we didn't quite know why we were doing it, but it was something we wondered, just can we do it? And we were able to create something along those lines, which maybe is vaguely relevant to things like excitable tissue in the heart and whatnot, but we didn't make any difference to heart rhythms. But understanding how we can control complex oscillating systems seemed like it was an area of interest to us that we tried to have a go at. And,
you understand that I didn't really understand what you did.
If it's any consolation, I didn't really either. But my point was that it was a collaboration between physics and chemistry and maths, where each of us were trying to learn each other's language and trying to work out what each other was even talking about, apparently with only partial success. But we ended up doing something I certainly would never have done by myself if I hadn't had the intelligence and inspiration of my
So
maths
when you are
colleagues.
combining stuff, you can create something that is unique. And
Certainly unique, yeah. Useful, who knows? But if you're creating unique things, eventually one of them will be useful.
And when you're combining things, it's kind of interesting, because I think it has a lot more likely potential because it's difficult to combine things from different topics. Because, for example, if I'm a YouTuber, I found that if I am a YouTuber that knows about science, history, philosophy, all this stuff,
Yeah.
I become so much better YouTuber than all the other YouTube. I'm not saying that I did it arrogant way, but my decision making becomes a lot, and I can create a lot of new and innovative things. And I think that's how, for example, I think Elon Musk, why he combined business and physics and like some different things a lot of things, engineering, and that's how when miracles are happening. And in the YouTubers have specific knowledge and they do all the stuff, the same things, but like when you're throwing them with a scientist, that will create something new. So
yeah, I think a lot of good ideas, exactly as you say, come from being exposed to something that you didn't know anything about, and maybe putting some effort into trying to understand it. You're putting a lot of effort into understand very broad areas of both science and humanities, and I'm sure you're learning things from the combination of that and having context and perspective. And this general idea of just being curious, I think, is a wonderful thing.
Yes. This is the meaning of my life now. We're coming back to nuclear reactions, because we mentioned that in the beginning.
Right.
And I'm curious to hear also your thoughts about fusion as well, and I don't know anything about it. I just hear that a lot of people are excited about fusion. So.
Yeah, I'm very excited about it. Again, I don't know a great deal other than what I've read in the press. But this is what keeps the sun burning, of course. It's a potentially limitless clean energy. Fusion has always been about 20 years away ever since I was born, from what I recall. But the trick is to confine it, to confine the plasma. It's a bit like taking a little chunk of the sun and confining it on Earth to the point where you can actually get more energy out of the nuclear reaction than you're having to put in to hold it in place. Because I think they hold it in place with this sort of magnetic, I forgot what the term is, a toroid or something like that. And it takes a lot of energy to maintain those magnetic fields to contain the reaction so that it doesn't just peter out.
So it's kind of a miracle when you find something that makes more energy that it takes to...
Yeah, it takes a lot of energy to start the reaction, a lot of energy to contain it. And obviously what you want to do is to get energy out again. And so it's like an investment, if you get less energy out than you put in.
If I have $1 and I give you and you give me 120, that's
You're
a good
losing
investment. And if I can keep doing that, I will become rich eventually.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
That's kind of the concept, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and I think we're getting closer and closer. There's certainly a lot of
investment. And this is all done by chemistry?
It's more physics, because if I understand rightly, you're combining hydrogen atoms to make helium atoms. That's the way the sun does it.
And you said on chemistry, you don't talk how to do split the atoms and stuff.
That's right.
You are talking about how electrons are going around the atoms. So you are not trying to divide and talk about atoms. You're talking the stuff that are around atoms.
Yeah, that's right. Chemistry is about how atoms bond to each other to make molecules, which is collections of
molecules.
Atoms. But it's not about changing one atom into another atom. So in this case, changing hydrogen into helium. But it's a fascinating area, and potentially, if it works, limitless clean energy. It would be amazing, wouldn't it?
Limitless clean energy.
We don't have to burn tables. We don't have to create carbon dioxide. It would be really amazing.
What are they saying? They're talking. It's a big conversation that people are talking now about nuclear plants, that is not good to shut them down, keep them, and it's not harming the environment, it's actually helping it. Do you have any idea? Is this chemistry?
Again, this is really the kind of nuclear physics, but I think the point is that the danger from our current nuclear technology, which is nuclear fission, comes from the waste that's generated. The waste can be radioactive, and that can be harmful. So as long as the waste is contained... Is
it the same thing, the fusion and the nuclear part?
Different. So fusion involves hydrogen, and it's essentially clean. What we currently do is we take uranium and we split it into smaller atoms, and those can be radioactive. But as long as it's contained within the nuclear plant, then there's no releases. It's clean. It doesn't create carbon dioxide. It doesn't cause global warming. But it's very difficult to handle the waste products. That's the problem with current nuclear technology. And of course, what you don't want to do is switch off the nuclear plant, because then it might explode. You might have a containment breach. You definitely want to keep it running as it's designed to run. Because the whole problem with Chernobyl was that the confinement broke and it basically melted down and the radioactive elements were released. And so it's that release that's the problem. It's not the operation of the plant.
So you cannot shut it down?
Not in an uncontrolled way. And again, this is nuclear engineering now. It's not my area at all. But my understanding is that if the plant is operating as it's designed to operate, then it's safe and clean. It's when you try and stop it in an unclean way, or stop it abruptly, or take away safeguards, then that becomes the problem. So the plant needs power to run, for example, and if that power is cut off, then that can be problematic.
What is the advice that you give to young people like me starting their lives?
Well, I think you probably don't need my advice. You're already flying in terms of what you're doing as your career. But I think...
Well, it's different only. Not only career advice. It can be life advice, happiness advice. But what advice you give to young people starting their lives?
That's a big question. Am I arrogant enough to answer it? Let's see.
Arrogant enough. I love this.
I think I think I would say listen. Always be humble enough to listen to the thing, and don't be afraid to learn. Don't always think you know it all. It can be very easy to think you know everything there is to know and not listen to people, but you can always learn things from people. So be humble, be curious, and listen to the answer when you ask a question, because somebody is giving you something for free.
So listen,
take it on board. You don't have to agree with people, but at least listen to them and make your own decisions.
Listen, and not just listen to listen, active.
Yeah.
Not active listen, but like actually try to understand what the other person is saying.
Yeah, and then
because everyone listens, but I'm not sure if everyone is actually actively trying. What he mean by that? Does he maybe do another question? Because I find it like so crazy. I think I'm kind of not unique, but kind of I don't see people as, because I ask so many stupid questions when I don't understand. I'm like, what do you know? What do you mean? What is that word? Like, for me to get the point, I ask so many questions about this for me to have clear image of what you are saying. And I don't see people are doing this. Like, people are like shy. They're like afraid to show that they don't know stuff, or they're afraid to say, oh, what is that word? You don't know that. Like, and I think this this type of listening, you mean?
Yeah, there's a difference between listening and hearing, isn't there? Listening and actually taking it in and deciding whether or not that's something of value to you. And you may decide it's not, but well, you're very good at asking questions and listening. And I think, and as you've said, you've learned a lot by doing that. And I think
this is where my university is, from people asking them questions daily.
Yeah, and often a lot of people like to talk. I mean, look at me, I'm chatting away here, and
it's crazy. Like, I just send you an email, and like people can get free, unlimited knowledge. Like, people can. I'm not going to encourage you guys to send him spam him on emails and ask him to.
I've only got so much limited time, but yeah, well, we're hoping to interest people in science by having this conversation, and that's something I'm interested in, and in fact, it's part of my job.
It's crazy how people are so willing to share their knowledge and speak about the stuff that they know. So, like, if you go to the local whatever university that you have, and like find one professor. Like, if one person comes, a random person, asks you, "Oh, can I attend your class one day?" I think you're going to say, "Yeah, come."
Be fine by me. I'm not sure whether my employer would like it, but
but I'm not talking specific to you. I don't want to get fired. But a professor will probably say, "Yeah, come and sit."
I think any professor would
in the lecture. So, and that's kind of, people are paying like hundreds of thousands of dollars to be on that lecture and learn from that professor and all this stuff. So it's crazy what you can get for free knowledge in this, if you are creative enough in this.
I think I'd slightly disagree that it's crazy. I think it's actually human nature. We're by nature a social species, and we've throughout evolution we've shared information and become stronger as a group as a result of it.
This is why humans took over the world.
Basically, it wasn't about our physical strength or our speed. It was about our knowledge, right?
You are saying it's not crazy. It's actually our superpower.
Put it that way. That's right. What was it I was reading the other day? Somebody said that the invention of writing was perhaps the most powerful thing ever, because it allows you to learn from voices that have been dead for thousands of years.
What arousing means?
The invention of writing.
Writing, yeah.
So it's not just you don't just learn by speaking to people that are in your physical presence. You can speak with people that are millions of miles away, that are dead.
Yes.
This
and now step. With the internet as well, that you can do it live with every other person in the world.
Exactly.
And that's, I think, why things are speeding up. The progress is speeding up. Things are. So I guess the future is very exciting.
It is, as long as we continue to listen to each other. It seems like things have maybe gone a little bit backwards with people stopping listening and just wanting to have their own opinions and not listen to others.
And maybe it's also all the beautiful things that the internet and the writing can get. to you and knowledge, but also it's come up with a lot of bad things that can happen. So we are the ones to balance. And I read one book that kind of changed my approach and my world view about this topic, the humankind. I don't know if you heard of it. And this guy is saying that actually to be optimistic, like a pill that you take in placebo effect, and like sometimes it's just the placebo effect that helps you. So just actually something, because we create what we think we're going to create. So if we believe that, for example, the world that we are living is selfish and like everyone is bad and all this stuff, we are going to create that world in the future. So it's kind of, when you think about that, it's kind of a big responsibility for us to be optimistic and like think about the future, optimistic future, because we might create that. We have higher chances of creating that if we think about
it. I think that's true. Sounds like a good philosophy.
So it's very interesting.
Absolutely, I agree. Yeah, and I also like the idea of kind of paying into a pool, if you like, that if you give something to the group, to humanity, don't necessarily expect something back for it. If you just pay something forward, you're contributing to the global pool.
We're all together in this. So you winning is like I'm winning. So
let's hope.
So what are some of the things that you want to do in the future yourself personally?
Yeah, well, it's funny.
4, 5, 6, 7 edition of this book, maybe.
I probably will. Yeah, I really like doing it. Every 10 years or so, I seem to do another edition. So, maybe my retirement project will be to do the next edition. It's funnily enough, I've been in chemistry a long time. I'm starting to think about what my retirement might look like and what my future life might look like. And I think moving into science communication in terms of writing, and I moved out into the country, so I kind of like the farmer sometimes lends me some sheep, and so we keep some sheep on the land sometimes, which is quite fun. And I look after the trees and whatnot. So I'm kind of getting a little bit more into country life. But your question was more science based, and
no, it was not more science based.
And the other thing I like to do is to cycle around the hills around here. Durham's a very hilly county and it's very beautiful, and so it's lovely just to get out in the countryside here and see some of the nature. So having been a city boy for much of my life, I'm gradually getting a bit more countrified, and enjoying that.
Interesting. When I think about you said you're a city person. Me, I'm the comparison. I'm the opposite, because I grew up in a village of 1,000 people. Wow. So I'm a village boy, and like city feels kind of unnatural for me. So, but you're talking about, so you feel more comfortable now in the countryside and with more like in the nature and stuff?
It's a transition. Yeah, I mean, I like to garden a little bit, but I was a student in London when I was your age, and I loved it. It was great. I was in London for 14 years as a student and as a young academic. But then, when I had a family, it was a bit more difficult to have a family in London, get to good schools, transport. So it was nicer to move up here. And Durham's a lovely place to live. I'm not flogging it, but it really is great. So now I kind of like more of the country kind of pace of life and the ability to go cycling and whatnot, and have a bit more space.
So you talked. Can you describe me kind of your academic career that you have? You went to what university? What you did after, for me to kind of get the cycle, and then you can talk about what's coming next in the academic.
I was a student at University College London, which was great. So in Bloomsbury in London. And I really love living in London.
You needed very good grades to get to...
Do you know you didn't at that time? No. I guess chemistry wasn't very popular. With 1987, I went to university. So I only got C's for my A-level grades, but I just about scraped in. And my class size was pretty small. Now you need good grades to get in. University College is a fantastic place. It was a fantastic place then too, but I guess national recruitment in chemistry was relatively low then.
Good thing for you.
A good thing for me, absolutely. Yeah. And they were wonderful. I mean, they just really sparked my interest in chemistry. I had a fantastic PhD supervisor there.
Did you understood from school that you liked chemistry?
Yeah, I think I was always going to do that. But I'm not sure I really knew what it involved until I went to university. And then
I like this, but I'm not sure exactly what it is.
It felt like it might be kind of a good thing. But yeah, the details probably I didn't know so much about. But yeah, I had really good teachers there. My PhD supervisor, a guy called Derek Tocker, was just wonderfully motivational, very enthusiastic all the time. Small, passionate Scotsman, and he's now a passionate cyclist as well, and really was great at just encouraging me. And then I went to the US. I was a postdoc at the University of Alabama and University of Missouri, where I met my advisor.
Postdoc, you mean you were doing work for?
It's like it's like a paid researcher, but you're not an independent academic. And I worked with a guy called Jerry Atwood there, who was my co-author on this book. And he was again a very inspirational figure, really fun to work with.
Another crazy guy that right, big.
Yeah, still a good friend 30 years on. And then I became an academic at King's College London in 1995. So I went back to London, but to a different university.
So you started teaching that straight to students. You were teaching students.
That's right. Yeah.
So you are doing that for how long? You're teaching students.
So I've been doing it ever since. So from 1995 through to 2023. So nearly 30 years.
Wow.
Yeah, and it never gets old. The students never get older. I just get older, and I don't look in the mirror. But it's always, that's the best bit, is just telling people about science.
And what is the kind of evolution that you saw yourself? For example, if I see myself not in 30 years, but in 3 years, for me, it's like in the beginning, I was kind of amateur YouTuber, not knowing how to storytell very well, like not knowing what really goes viral and all this stuff. What is stuff that you learn in those 30 years about teaching people?
About teaching people? I think it comes back to what we were saying earlier. It's about listening and trying to work out where each individual student is and what they individually need. You know, some will be very good on the particular factual stuff, but might lack some confidence. Others will be very confident, but perhaps need to be a bit more introspective. Some of them will have specific questions that they need answered. Others will just want to talk around the area a bit more generally. And just encouraging them to be their best self, I think, is perhaps the best bit. And that probably means just not being unpleasant and gruff with people. It comes back to what I said about there being no such thing as a stupid question. That I had one student once years ago who always used to say, "Oh, this is probably stupid. I'm not going to do very well in this." And she was actually very bright, and she handed in a lab report, and it was a great lab report. And I wrote on the lab report, going back 20 years now, you often say that you're stupid and your work won't be very good, but your work in this lab has been really excellent. And she told me afterwards that made her day and really affected her life, that it gave her a lot more confidence. Just writing that comment on there and saying, you know, you are not who you say you are. You're really good at this. And I think just seeing that individual needed that encouragement that they were bright, and showing her that I'd seen how bright she was, I thought was an important thing to do.
Noticing people as well.
Yeah. So I guess it comes back to the usual things that the same for you and me, treating people as individuals, listening, being respectful, these things. And that applies to the teacher-student relationship and to colleague relationships.
For how many years you are going to teach in the future now?
I don't know. I mean, I'm 53 now, so I've still got a fair bit of career ahead of me.
How much?
When
people are retiring.
The normal retirement age these days is about 67 or 68, I think. I may not go that long. We'll see. But your question was broader. How long am I going to teach for? I might still be teaching even if I'm not teaching a university course.
Okay. In what way?
Writing books or maybe doing podcasts. Who knows?
This is your first podcast that you did, right?
Apart from some amateur thing with Zoom. Yeah, that's right, it is.
So I'm curious to hear your experience in this. Let's talk about this podcast.
Well, I'm going to tell you two different things. One, I'm amazed by the amount of professionalism there is that people can't see, but the cameras and lights and the effort that's gone into creating just a quality piece of video is fantastic. But other than that, it's just felt like a nice conversation. But that's your skill as an interviewer. I notice you don't have any notes or anything like that. You've just spoken with your own curiosity. And here we've been talking for 2 hours without let, just upon life, the universe, and everything. And that's a great skill as well. And that's a great professional skill. So it's been really good fun for me and hasn't felt like work, that's how to learn easily, isn't it?
I think we close it with this comment. It was very fun for me to try to see a different beautiful part about chemistry. And I think you achieved to not make me in love with chemistry, but at least not to hate chemistry. So okay. Now I see the beauty inside in chemistry, and I think the use actually that you can actually change, influence life, do a lot of things with chemistry in the world. And I would definitely be more interested to understand it in the future because I don't know. I have a lot of big dreams, and for me to understand about like creating companies and all this stuff, I think chemistry will be a useful tool for me in the future.
Sounds like we've made some progress then.
Yes.
Thanks a lot for listening and talking about science with me.
Yes, I love you guys. Thank you for doing this. Bye-bye.